Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Romeo and Juliet. In this video, we're going to be looking at Act 1, Scene 3, focusing on the relationships between Juliet, Lady Capulet and the nurse, whilst exploring the very, very important theme of love and marriage. So let's get started. Okay, so quick plot summary for you. This scene is all about the relationships between Juliet, her nurse, and her mother as they talk about Juliet's readiness to get married. We learn that Juliet is near 14, as we learned in the previous scene, and so it is deemed an appropriate time for her to start thinking about the concept of marriage. And her mother asks her whether or not, or how stands your disposition to be married, as if she really has a choice in the matter. The prospect of Paris is put forward to Juliet, and Juliet's mother, Lady Capulet, talks about all of Paris's virtues. It seems to be largely about the way that he looks. I mean, here he's obviously presented by the very handsome Paul Rudd. But yeah, so and Juliet kind of agrees to sort of have a little look and see what she thinks. Okay, so let's start off by thinking about the concept of maternal relationships, maternal being motherly. So this is very, very early on in the scene. It's the very beginning of the scene, and we can immediately see that the more motherly relationship appears to be between the nurse and Juliet. So Lady Capulet says, "Where's my daughter? Call her forth to me." And the nurse, "Now by my maidenhead, at 12 years old, I bade her come." So this is a bit of an introduction to what the nurse is like, that she uses sort of more bawdy humour. In this case, she's swearing on her virginity at the age of 12, saying, you know, "I promise I made her come, I just as I was a virgin at the age of 12. That she can swear on that. But then look at the way that she calls to Juliet. What lamb, what ladybird, God forbid where's this girl, what Juliet. So you've got these real like terms of endearment through this sort of like pet names, metaphors, lamb and ladybird. And there's a kind of sort of sweet maternal frustration, you know, where has this girl got to? And so then Juliet appears. "How now? Who calls? Your mother." But look at the contrast in the way that Juliet responds. This is to her mother. "Madam, I am here. What is your will?" It's very polite. It's very formal. "This is the matter," says Lady Capulet. "Nurse, give leave a while, we must talk in secret. Nurse, come back again, I have remembered me. Thou hears our counsel." This is such a strange moment where she gets rid of the nurse because she's like, this is secret stuff. And then being alone with her daughter, she's like, oh, no, actually, nurse, come back. Almost like she needs the security of the nurse as well, just like Juliet does. But there does seem to be this sort of discomfort, coldness between mother and daughter here that is so heavily juxtaposed in the sort of sweetness in the relationship that the nurse has with Juliet. And that's really backed up through the story that the nurse tells here. You can see like how comfortable she is around Juliet, you know, the fact that she holds the floor in this way. They're talking here about how old Juliet is, the fact that she's not yet 14. And the nurse just goes off on one about how it is that she knows that she's not quite 14, because she's telling the story of when Juliet was a toddler and she was trying to wean her, i.e., so again, I mean, this is very typical of the time, particularly for families with status and wealth, but Juliet was breastfed by the nurse, not by her mum. So that maternal relationship or feeling that we're getting perhaps comes from the fact that the nurse was the one doing that caregiving at the very beginning. So she's talking here about how she had to put wormwood on her nipple to try and stop Juliet from wanting to have milk from her this day, and she remembers because there was an earthquake, and that it's 11 years since then. So that's how she remembers that Juliet is 13. And then she tells this other little bit of a story about this moment And it says, for then she could stand alone. Nay, by the word, she could have run and waddled all about. For even the day before, so the day before this earthquake happened, she broke her brow. So she fell over and hurt herself. And then my husband, God be with his soul, was a merry man, took up the child. Yea, quoth he, dost thou fall upon thy face? Thou wilt fall backwards when thou hast more wit. Wilt that not, Jewel? And by my hologram the pretty wretch left crying and said, I, to see now how a jest shall come about. So she's talking about the fact that when she was just a little toddler, 2 years old, she'd fallen over on her face, and her husband made a joke, lol, about how a time would come where Juliet wouldn't fall on her face, she would fall on her back, i.e. be ready to have sexual intercourse. And she's laughing about the fact that Juliet, obviously not quite understanding the joke, was like, yes, there will be a time. And so now the nurse is like, goodness me, I can't believe that time has come, to see now how a jest shall come about. So she's like, you know, it was a joke at the time, but now we're getting to that point. So she's recognizing that this 11 years on, Juliet is now at the age where she will fall backwards. So we're being reminded here that this isn't about love. This isn't about like you're ready to fall in love, and it's you're ready to reproduce, you're ready to have sex. That's what this is about. So let's look at the way that the notion of marriage is introduced here. So this is Lady Capulet talking to the nurse right at the beginning. She says, thou knowest my daughter is of a pretty age. And I put this on here because this idea of being a pretty age, again, it's about functionality. Her age is pretty, i.e. her age is attractive, because she's going through puberty or has started going through puberty, i.e. she can reproduce. Sorry to be so blunt about it, but it is actually, it's not, oh, she's really pretty now, so someone will fall in love with her. It's she's ripe for reproduction. It's so strange to kind of think about it in this way because our lives are so very different now. So Lady Capulet says, how stands your dispositions to be married? Juliet, it is an honour that I dream not of. This is quite clever of Juliet here. She's pointing out that it's not something that she's thinking about. You know, she's 13 years old. Of course she's not thinking about marriage, but she is careful to be polite and to reference it in those respectful terms that her mother and her father will expect by using this abstract noun, honour. It is an honour that I dream not of. Ooh. I'm so sorry about sneezing. I'm going to keep going. And there's an irony in this as well. You know, Lady Capulet is using this interrogative question that suggests that Juliet has some sort of choice in the matter. Like Juliet could say, actually, no, I don't want to get married at the moment. I think I'm too young. That's just not true. The moment that her parents decide, even if her dad, even if, you know, Capulet was suggesting that she had some kind of consent, she doesn't. Okay, well, think of marriage now. Younger than you, here in Verona, ladies of esteem are made already mothers. Again, Lady Capulet. Note the use of imperative here. Think of marriage now. So it's very much like, well, you're not, you know, you haven't dreamt of it. Well, you need to start thinking about it because younger than you are made already mothers. Again, focus on the reproduction. It's on the getting pregnant. Women, I can't say women, girls, she's only 13 years old. So the point is that girls younger than Julia are already not just pregnant, but they've had their babies. So they've probably got married at 12, which is pretty much the age that Lady Capulet married Lord Capulet. So it's a kind of cycle and it's an expectation. There's nothing much romantic about this. Okay, and then we get to it. Lady Capulet. Thus then, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love. So note the kind of almost like contractual nature of this. It's like, right, let's get to this point. I've told you to think about marriage. Here we are. Valiant Paris seeks you for his love. So Paris is obviously elevated in terms of his desirability through that attributive adjective valiant, the valiant Paris. So this is a trait that is very attractive in a man. Yeah, powerful, courageous, brave. And he, is seeking her out for his love. So there's a kind of sense of agency. Paris has decided she's the one, he's seeking her out. There's a kind of sense of, right, let's get to it. What do you think about this? Okay. I almost said Lady Macbeth. Lady Capulet then starts explaining or extolling the virtues of Paris. So let's just have a little read through. Do have a look at some of the things I've underlined, and then I'll help you out with some devices and some discussion points as well. What say you? Can you love the gentleman? This night you shall behold him at our feast. Read over the volume of young Paris's face, and find delight writ there with beauty's pen. Examine every married lineament, and see how one another lends content, and what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margin of his eyes. This precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him, only lacks a cover. The fish lives in the sea, and 'tis much pride for fair without the fair within to hide. That book in many's eyes doth share the glory, that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So shall you share all that he doth possess, by having him, making yourself no less. Okay, so having a little look at this, first off, let's start by thinking about the modal verbs at the top. So can you love the gentleman? And then this night you shall. So shall is a modal verb that suggests certainty. So she's telling her what to do. Like, you will look at him, you are going to come across him, you are going to find him. So like there's a certainty. But the modal verb can you love the gentleman suggests it's a choice, that it's something that you decide to do. So she's asking her to decide to love Paris. It's not really about that impulsive feeling, that sudden excitement that you fall in love, that's almost out of your control. No, in this case, it's you need to actually assess him and decide whether you can make the choice to do this. And then these imperatives continue. So read over the volume, find delight, examine, see. So these words here, these are all imperatives. So she's very much giving instructions, telling Juliet what to do in this situation. Again, reminding us that Juliet really doesn't have that much control. But it also introduces to us this idea of the extended metaphor. So that's when a metaphor is sort of repeated in different ways across a sequence of lines, not just said once. And in this case, it's all about the idea of Paris's face being a book that is to be read and enjoyed. So we've got read, we've got volume, we've got writ, beauty's pen, okay, we've got content, volume, book, unbound lover only lacks a cover. So this idea that she can read him in order to assess what he's like. It's also reminding us that he's someone to kind of look at, that, you know, he's a handsome man. But it's a reminder in this case, this sense of love and attraction, it's very much skin deep. It's about looking at him. Now, she tells her to look at his beauty, examine every line, and see how one another lends content. But then she says, what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margin of his eyes. So she's like, so if there's anything that you can't quite tell about him by the way that he looks, well then look deep into his eyes and you'll see it there. This is this belief in moral physiognomy, the idea that you could kind of understand about a person's soul through the way that they looked. You're handsome, you're good. You're ugly, you're bad, morally. And then we get this little bit here, that precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him only lacks a cover. So she's basically saying the one thing that he doesn't have that would make him even better is a wife. So Juliet is the cover. It's a metaphor for a wife, i.e. he will only kind of be complete once that little bit is kind of boxed off. He's got his wife, and therefore, you know, he can have children. Again, comes back to that idea. A fish lives in the sea, 'tis much pride for fair without the fair within to hide. So this is about kind of saying, like, come on, almost to say, if you're not looking to do this, there's something wrong. That book in many's eyes doth share the glory, that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So now we're getting this language that is to do with value and worth. glory, gold, golden. So, and again, it's about the idea about other people, the way that they perceive him. So I think as well, she's sort of telling her to get a little bit of a wriggle on, you know, that there are other women looking, and what she needs to do is lock him in, because actually you shall share all that he doth possess by having him, making yourself no less. So it's all about the benefit that Juliet will get from marrying Paris, that she will benefit from his worth and his love and his beauty. It will make her the more beautiful being part of this union. So it's all to do with the idea of status. So Lady Capulet is dealing with the kind of idea of what Juliet will get wealth-wise, status-wise. The nurse plays on this and she goes, no less, nay, bigger women grow by men. So immediately the nurse is getting straight back into the idea of the physical impact of getting married. So Lady Capulet is like money, status, and the nurse's sex, pregnancy. So again, it's that reminder that the moment that you're married, sort of off you trot in that way. And here is Juliet's response, which I think is very, very telling. She says, I'll look to like, if looking liking move, but no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly. So on the surface, this looks very much like she is saying yes to her mother, to agree, but whilst also saying, but obviously I won't go any further than you think is acceptable. Like I'll be guided by you and your consent. And she says, you know, I will look to like, so a modal verb there, like again suggesting certainty. Yeah, I will do it if looking liking move. So there is a sort of deliberate vagueness. She's like, I'll see, I'll look at him and I'll see if I like him, if the look of him, you know, pleases me. But no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly. So the allusion here is to Cupid's dart. So, you know, she won't sort of, she won't use a dart to pierce too strongly, other than what her mother's consent will allow, like make it fly. So that's the sort of metaphor there. So she seems to be agreeing, but at the same time she's also allowing herself a bit of distance. So this Juliet sounds quite reasonable, quite logical, quite practical, and you know, quite able to sort of negotiate the requirements that she faces in doing what her mother says, while still being able to kind of like hold back. Perhaps we're being told here through this careful answer that, you know, she doesn't buy in to their versions of love and marriage, that, you know, the nurse is about sex and the mother is about status. So perhaps this is just this beginning, this early presentation of Juliet looking for something more. Just very, very quickly, lastly from me, obviously, themes of love and marriage being explored here, or the lack of love in marriage. You know, this idea of love being a choice that you can make. I will try to love him in order to benefit in these ways. It also really reminds us of this influence of the family and how little control Juliet has. You might think to yourself, well, patriarchal influence, Lord Capulet isn't even in this scene, but he doesn't need to be. All of this is coming from his wishes. Yeah, he's the one that sat down and had the chat with Paris, and now Lady Capulet's job is to smooth this over and present it to Juliet. This is coming from Lord Capulet. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got any questions about the scene or any other parts of the play, do just drop me a line in the comments and I will come back to you. If you haven't subscribed, do click that button and then you will see when Act 1, Scene 4 and all of the other scenes are available to you. Thanks so much. Happy revising.